but that was required by state law, which specifically says we could not deficit spend. We asked for the concessions, we laid it out on the table that
Absolutely.
this is what we want from you. How you want to do it is up to you. You tell us how we want to do it. This is what we need. And we did that with all of the bargaining units on a percentage basis of what it would take to bring the budget in line. You know, they said, well, we got hit the worst. Well, because you're the biggest. I mean, the biggest is going to...
Well, they were the last holdout.
But they were the last holdout. I mean, we had successful negotiations that wrapped up prior to May of this year. We had, we had agreements with the secretary. We had agreements with the teacher assistants. We've had agreements with principals. We've also had agreements with the custodians, who, by the way, had a contract in force, didn't have to come back to the table. But they understood that what was going on the city side, with the city council saying that we're going to eliminate our custodians, we're going to privatize, we're going to bring people in at half the price. They said, hey, we take pride in our jobs, right? We want to do a good job in those schools. These guys, they're in those schools, they know those schools. They all know those schools. The kids know those guys in the schools. The teachers know them, the principals know them. It's just a better situation to have somebody in there that you know and you trust. Right?
Absolutely.
And they stepped up to the plate, and we ended up with with a fair agreement that they were satisfied with, and as a school committee we were satisfied with this, and that's happened all the way across the board. Signed, sealed, and delivered labor agreements right across the board. Mm-hmm. So it's, to say that we can't handle the situation, we're refusing to bargain in good faith with the unions is totally disingenuous. It's not true.
Wasn't it the teachers union, the teachers membership, that were the last people in the city of East Providence to co-pay?
Absolutely.
They were the last in the state, I believe, right? As far as
prior to the implementation, I don't believe that there was anybody. There may have been one other district. I can't recall.
Yeah, seems to me that I heard that
they may have indeed been the only one that was left.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Even then, they complain after everyone else is already doing this, and they know everyone else is doing
well,
this.
and everybody and they love to harp on the cost of the litigation that Dan Kinder's gotten rich off the taxpayers. What happens is that it takes two people to go to court.
Absolutely.
These actions weren't brought by the school committee. They were the reaction of everything every move we make. The NEA is we're going to court. We're going to court. We're going to court. Right.
In other words, what they're saying is, if you don't fight us, you don't have to spend. Just give us what we want. Exactly. You don't have to spend money on lawyers.
But on every step of the way. I mean, Judge Silverstein, agreed with us. The Supreme Court said no. It has to go back. For clarification, when Judge Silverstein made the final ruling, he did indeed rule that yes, the school committee acted within its power. It had the right to do what it did. Under state law, it was required to do what it did.
Sure.
And we were perfectly legal in what we were doing.
Well, not only were you perfectly legal, but you really had no other recourse.
None whatsoever.
Because
none whatsoever.
You had your budget that you had settled on for the year, and you had to make that budget. And I mean, after a decade of running deficits.
Yeah, well, I'm proud. We stood up and we did what we had to do. Right. We did what we had to do to protect the school system from running up a deficit that we would never be able to pay off. And we're still saddled with a deficit that's been hanging around for years and years and years.
Prior to that.
Prior to that.
Sure.
But at least now, we've got annual savings from the three different, from the contracts, from the teachers and the other associated contracts. Well in excess of $4 million a year. Probably closer to $5 million when you add in everything, that's been implemented or that's going to be implemented over the time. When you take a look at the length of these contracts, that's money that's not being forced upon the property taxpayers.
Absolutely.
And may I remind you that the East Providence Taxpayers Association did some analysis on the numbers, and if they hadn't made those cuts, which my opponent is the only one that opposed those cuts, so she favored giving the teachers keeping the same salary, that translated into an average of about $750 a
Yes.
year per household.
That's
Now,
correct.
she's been there for 2 years, so that meant $1,500
That's
for the
$1,500.
last 2 years
Sure.
extra on your property taxes on average per household in East Providence. So remember that my opponent opposed these cuts. If she had had her way, you would have paid $1,500 more on average over the last 2 years on your property taxes.
And, by the way, if Jack Savage had had his way, binding arbitration, had binding arbitration gone in prior to the settling of this contract, we never would have got the concessions that we were looking
Absolutely
for.
not.
The concessions that, not that we were looking for, but the concessions that we needed as a city to stay viable. You know, to segue into that, binding arbitration is not good for the taxpayers of East Providence. They'll tell you that it's a way to
avoid conflict,
to avoid,
settle.
the conflict and everything else. But you know what? We got through the conflict. We settled. We got a contract. We survived. We will be a stronger city as a result of that. So binding arbitration, it's no good for East Providence. It's no good for Rhode Island.
It's no good for any community. They keep bringing up Connecticut that they have binding arbitration. Well, Connecticut also has one of the highest teacher salaries in the country.
Exactly.
Reason being, they win most of the arbitration. Once in a while they'll throw a bone at the local cities and towns, but most of the time they win, the unions win the arbitration because the people deciding are from unions or union friendly. And besides, why should an outsider, a person who's not elected by the taxpayers, decide how much money they're going to make and what your tax rate is? At least if it's decided at the local level. If I decided and you don't like me, you have a chance to throw me out of office. That person is getting paid to make a decision, and you don't elect that person, so it's not fair.
Exactly.
You're ceding your right as a citizen. You're giving up your right to make, to have
to a
your
representative
elected
democracy.
representative make
Sure.
your decisions for you.
And, you know, I'm sure the General Assembly wouldn't want someone in their place deciding, oh, by the way, that's a bad law, so we're going to change it.
We'll go arbitration.
You know, we'll go to binding arbitration.
That's an interesting concept.
It'll never happen.
We'll have the governor sit on that board.
Yeah.
Well, I think time's getting short, gentlemen. I want to thank you very much for being on the show tonight. We appreciate all your efforts, everything you do. And I'll take this time, be aware of what's going on. Educate yourself to the people that are running for office. Find out, you know, what their ideology is. Find out, you know, who they support. We need to support the citizenry of East Providence. We need to support the taxpayers. We need to look out for the city of East Providence. Do not be lured in by people who want to go back to the old ways. The old ways are 10 years of deficit spending that put us $6 million in the hole, a hole that we still haven't dug ourselves out of. So we don't want to go back to that. You know, as hard as it is to go through what we've had to go through, and I'll speak for Steve and the rest of the school committee, nobody liked doing what they had to do. Nobody took joy in doing any of that, but it was a necessary thing to do.
May I say something, Bob?
Absolutely. Go right ahead.
For those of you who don't have time to do the research on the candidates, Governor Kacheri came up with a brilliant thing the other day. He said, basically, if you don't know what's going on, if you don't follow politics, do one thing. Find out who the unions are supporting, then vote for the other guy.
Exactly.
You can't go wrong. If you're a taxpayer, vote for the other guy. You can't go wrong.
That's one of the reasons, if you notice on my literature that I put out in my ads, I proudly say that, you know, I'm working for everyone and I'm owned by no one. I don't answer to anybody but the people who elect me to the district. I'm not on that list for that reason.
And the final word is November 2nd, Tuesday, get out and vote. Thank you.
Thank you.